Our first scripture this morning may be found on page 690 of the Old Testament section of your pew Bibles, reading from Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 through 6. The prophet calls upon Zion to be a light to the nations. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice. Because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you, the wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you, and the young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. Our second reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, and may be found on page 2 of the New Testament section of your pew Bibles. The Magi come to Bethlehem to see the Christ child. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out. And there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
For centuries, people have looked to the stars, and stars became pivotal in cultural stories, myths, in navigation, and in foretelling events. Have you ever looked into the night sky that was filled with billions of stars? Do you remember what that felt like? Maybe the sky was perfectly clear and you could see stars that seemed to go on forever. Maybe it looked as if the sky had been scattered with silver glitter and you were utterly amazed at the heavens. Stars, or rather a special star, are pivotal in today's scripture lesson. Today we celebrate Epiphany, which actually took place yesterday on January 6th. One of the ways Epiphany is defined is it's the time when the baby Jesus was visited by the Magi. Now, the Magi were men who understood how to read the stars and the sky. And something wonderful happened when they looked up one night. History and astronomical evidence suggests that two major events happened around the years of 7 to 5 BC. It's been suggested by some that maybe this is what the Magi saw. Scientists believe that planets orbited very close to each other. That's called a conjunction. And when they do that, they appear as one very bright star. Another and more common theory suggests that there was a comet, and it looked like a traveling star. And while the science is really fun to think about, what's more important is that something great happened, and the Magi were paying attention to what was going on around them. I think we need to consider that there are more layers to this story. I wonder about the Magi's journey and the possible lessons that they learned. I wonder if this was a journey of epiphanies. Because epiphany can also mean a time when you suddenly know or feel or understand that something is really important. When the Magi saw this special star, I wonder if they had an epiphany that this is what they had been waiting for. I wonder if they were amazed. Did their pulses race? Did their breath quicken? In seeing this extraordinary event, they drew on their knowledge of the writings and history that supported the birth of a child king. And they prepared to follow that star wherever it led them. And thus began a journey of hope and possibility that has become one of the most beloved biblical stories. The book of Matthew tells us that the Magi arrived in Jerusalem, the hub of the Jewish world, and they asked where they could find this child who was born King of the Jews. In making their inquiries, they soon realized that they were not where they needed to be. I wonder if they were confused or dismayed. Most likely they had ridden long, slow miles, only to be disappointed when they discovered their long-sought child king was not to be found there. Had they miscalculated something? Were they doubting the path they had taken? Perhaps in seeing this star so close to Jerusalem and knowing that it was a center of authority and power for King Herod, the wise men went to the sensible place to find a king. But because Jesus was not there, the Magi had to look to other possibilities. The star had convinced them that this was important, but the wise men came to the realization that they had to rely on strangers to find their way. The scribes and priests that Herod gathered would have been familiar with the scriptures. They knew the passages indicating about a ruler coming from Bethlehem. If the Magi had decided just to keep to their own thoughts and ways and devices, they might have just decided to go home, or maybe just wander aimlessly for the child. But they didn't. They listened to advice passed on from those scribes and priests, and in listening, they set out in faith. And then the star appeared, the star that would guide them to the Christ child. And in finding Jesus, the Magi were filled with joy, so much joy that they were overwhelmed. And I think just maybe they had another epiphany. I don't think this was a typical homage. They were overwhelmed. And I think in those moments of overwhelming joy, these wise men realized that Jesus was no ordinary child king. I think they had a deep, soul-searing moment of understanding that with Jesus, everything changed. Here they were, Gentiles and foreigners. Yet something in that experience told them that they were more than just accepted and welcomed on a political basis. They were truly accepted as they were. And I believe they were completely engulfed in God's love. The scriptures then tell us that the wise ones had a revelation. They knew they should not return to Herod. To return by a familiar path to a familiar place would not be wise. They knew that to get home, they had to take another road, perhaps one less familiar to them. And now, through the lens of history, we see that these are among the first indications of how meeting Jesus changes lives. As we learned last week, the old soul of Simeon had it right. Jesus was to be a light for revelation for the Gentiles and for the glory of the people of Israel. So what epiphanies might we have from this story? What might we understand or become aware of that's really important? We need to stay focused on the fact that God welcomes sincere hearts, and we must always demonstrate dignity and respect, even when others' ways are different from our own. God welcomes all to God's presence. We learn that sometimes our assumptions might lead us to places where we miss the mark, and that can lead to doubt and misgivings. Sometimes we will have adversity and surprises. We might have to start something over or need more time to do things. But God will gift us with people and knowledges and experiences that help us keep the course, and we will reach the goals that God puts before us. There may be times when traveling the safe, easy, or sensible road is not where we need to be. We may realize that we need to shift plans, slow down, or speed up. We might need to take some unfamiliar paths to fulfill our mission and find our way home. But most of all, we need to pay close attention to what's going on around us. We need to keep ourselves open to God reaching out to us in unexpected ways. We need to keep our eyes on the stars and be assured of the good things that South Street can accomplish. Because in keeping open to the great possibilities that are born of God, we, like the Magi, will find that our journey leads us to the overwhelming joy of the Holy One. Amen.